Goldie Hawn reveals the 5 actors she hates more than anybody. America's sweetheart, the golden girl of comedy, with that infectious laugh and sunny personality that has charmed audiences for more than 5 decades, Goldie Hawn would seem like a person who wouldn't have an enemy in the world. But behind that dazzling smile and bubbly persona lies something few fans know about: a steely resolve and an unwavering standard for how people should behave, especially in Hollywood. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on 5 shocking feuds between Goldie and some of the biggest male stars in the industry. These aren't just minor disagreements or tabloid fabrications. Rather, these are deep-seated resentments built on troubling behavior, painful set experiences, and fundamental clashes of personality that Goldie has privately discussed for years. What's most surprising, though, is how the Golden Girl has kept up her public image while harboring these feelings for some of Hollywood's most powerful men. The juxtaposition between her bright public persona and these private grievances exposes a much more complex woman than most fans ever realized. You might wonder how someone as universally loved as Goldie Hawn could feel so negatively towards other major stars. Isn't Hollywood just one big happy family? Hardly. Filmmaking reality puts an enormous strain on relationships, which can be called upon to work together in high-stress situations over months at a time when having wildly different temperaments. And Goldie, despite her sunny image, has always been something else behind the scenes: a consummate professional with little patience for difficult behavior from her colleagues. Now, let's take a closer look at the 5 men who got on the wrong side of Hollywood's Golden Girl, and why their conflicts reveal so much about the true power dynamics of the entertainment industry. 1. Chevy Chase, the co-star, who tested her limits on screen. They had undeniable chemistry. Foul Play, released in 1978, showcased the comedic talents of both Goldie Hawn and Chevy Chase at the height of their powers. Their timing was perfect, their rapport seemed genuine, and audiences fell in love with them as a duo. The film would go on to make more than $50 million, massive numbers, for the late 1970s, and critics raved about the pairing's on-screen chemistry. But what happened when the cameras weren't rolling told an entirely different story. According to multiple sources close to Goldie, working with Chevy Chase was one of the most challenging experiences of her career. The problem started almost immediately with Chase's punctuality, or rather, his lack thereof. The former Saturday Night Live star reportedly made a habit of arriving late to set, sometimes keeping the entire production waiting for hours. For someone like Goldie, who prided herself on professionalism and preparedness, this wasn't just annoying, it was downright disrespectful. Then there was Chase's ego. By 1978, he had already established himself as one of comedy's biggest stars. His transition from SNL to movies had been remarkably successful, and Foul Play came on the heels of his hit film Oh Heavenly Dog. This success, according to those who worked with him, had given Chase an inflated sense of his own importance, and it showed in his treatment of others on set. Chevy would constantly needle Goldie between takes, says a crew member from Foul Play, who asked for anonymity. He'd nitpick her line readings or tell her to try different ways. Even though she was an Oscar winner already and he was still relatively new to film acting, it set up this strange friction that was palpable to everyone. Part of what made it so hard was that Chase was not consistently such a problem. One minute he would be charming, humorous, and convivial, the next dismissive and condescending. And that unpredictability made it virtually impossible for Goldie to develop a comfortable working relationship with him. The breaking point was said to occur during the filming of a highly demanding comedic sequence. After innumerable takes, director Colin Higgins felt satisfied that they had nailed it and asked to move on. Chase loudly insisted they do another take, suggesting that Goldie had missed some of the comedy beats. According to witnesses, Goldie kept her cool in the moment, but was later overheard telling her longtime agent, "I love the character, but not the man." Years later, when asked about potential future collaborations with Chase, Goldie was diplomatic yet firm. Some people just have different approaches to their work. Chevy is tremendously talented. His comic timing is perfect. But sometimes perfect timing isn't everything if you're not aware of anyone else in the room. What makes this feud particularly interesting is how successfully both stars have managed to keep it under wraps. They've appeared at industry events together, exchanged pleasantries, and never publicly criticized each other. But behind closed doors, according to sources, Goldie has pulled every string in her extensive industry influence to ensure their paths rarely cross professionally. Their conflict represents a classic Hollywood dynamic: the clashes between raw talent and professional courtesy, between being good at your job and being good to work with. For Goldie Hawn, that distinction had always been crystal clear. 2. Bill Murray, the star she refused to work with. Unlike her history with Chevy Chase, Goldie Hawn and Bill Murray never actually worked together on a film. And according to industry insiders, that was very much by Goldie's design. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Murray and Hawn were two of comedy's biggest draws. Their pairing would have seemed natural for studio executives looking to create box office magic. In fact, they were reportedly considered for at least 3 major projects together during this period. Each time, negotiations advanced to serious stages before Goldie ultimately passed on the opportunity. Why would one of Hollywood's most successful actresses repeatedly turn down opportunities to work with one of its biggest male stars? The answer, according to those close to Goldie, lies in what she had heard about Murray's on-set behavior, particularly his treatment of women. Goldie does her homework, explained a longtime friend to the actress. Before signing on to any project, she talks to people who've worked with her potential co-stars. What she heard about Bill Murray set off major alarm bells. The reports that allegedly concerned Goldie centered around Murray's behavior during the filming of What About Bob? In 1991, the comedy, co-starring Richard Dreyfuss, was notoriously troubled. Tensions between Murray and director Frank Oz have been well documented. But what really caught Goldie's attention were stories about how Murray's erratic behavior affected female members of the crew. Several women who worked on What About Bob described Murray as having wild mood swings, being charming and collaborative one minute and coldly dismissive the next. There were reports of him ignoring female crew members' input, talking over women in meetings, and occasionally making uncomfortable comments that walked the line between joke and insult. One of the more disturbing incidents reportedly took place over a minor scheduling mistake by one of the female production assistants. According to eyewitnesses, Murray screamed at her in front of the full crew until she was reduced to tears. When another woman intervened to defend the abused employee, Murray allegedly turned on her as well. When those stories filtered back to Goldie through the Hollywood grapevine, she supposedly reached out to her agent and said, "I don't do bullies." Sure, Bill was charming while the cameras were running, but that's not enough. What perhaps makes Goldie's stance all the more remarkable is that it was well in advance of the Me Too movement, which propelled questions about on-set power dynamics into the mainstream. At a time when many looked the other way in the face of difficult behavior from male stars, Goldie was quietly digging in her heels. "She's always been ahead of her time that way," says a director who has worked with Hawn multiple times. Goldie understood her own value and the power she had in choosing carefully who to collaborate with. She never needed to make a public statement. She just quietly declined projects that would put her in situations she considered unhealthy. In the years since, Murray's reputation for difficult behavior has become more widely known. Conflicts with directors like Harold Ramis and actors like Lucy Liu have made headlines. More recently, production on the film Being Mortal was suspended in 2022 due to a complaint about Murray's on-set behavior. For her part, Goldie has maintained a diplomatic silence about Murray in public, never directly criticizing him in interviews. When asked in a 2018 conversation why she and Murray had never worked together despite being comedy contemporaries, she simply smiled and said, "Sometimes the right project just doesn't come along." Those who know her well, however, understood exactly what she meant. 3. Donald Sutherland, the intellectual who crossed a line. Donald Sutherland is rightly regarded as one of the most talented actors of his generation. From MASH to Ordinary People to The Hunger Games, he's given a wide range of performances and has shown incredible depth throughout his career. But if Goldie Hawn's friends are to be believed, his artistic brilliance comes with a personality that Goldie found impossible to tolerate. not because of how he treated her, but because of how she witnessed him treating another actress. The story starts back in the 1970s when Sutherland was on set for a film with actress Jill Clayberg. While Goldie wasn't on set, she was a close friend of Clayberg's and would often visit her. What she apparently witnessed during these visits stuck with her. Donald had this way of making people feel intellectually inferior. Remembered a makeup artist who worked on the production. He would quote some obscure literature or philosophy, then look slightly disappointed when someone didn't catch his references. With men, it was annoying. With women, it often felt deliberately belittling. According to sources, Clayberg became a particular target for this behavior. As a Yale graduate with a formidable intellect herself, she at first engaged with Sutherland's high-minded discussions between takes. But when she challenged some of his opinions or offered different interpretations, witnesses say his demeanor would change dramatically. He would get this look, said the makeup artist, this cold, dismissive expression, and he would talk over her or subtly mock her points. It was uncomfortable to watch because it was so clearly about putting her in her place. Sutherland allegedly called her out in front of the crew for a particular scene, saying her performance was fundamentally missing the existential underpinnings of the character. The public dressing down reportedly left her shaken and undermined for the rest of the shoot. And when Goldie saw how her friend was being treated, she was livid. After one particularly tense day on set, Goldie and Clayberg went out for dinner, during which time Goldie reportedly said to her friend, "That man has the emotional warmth of a marble statue. I don't care how talented he is. No one deserves to be treated that way." True to her word, Goldie seemed to make a conscious decision to never work with Sutherland, despite the various opportunities that came along over the years. In the early 1980s, they were both in consideration for leading roles in the same romantic comedy. But Goldie pulled out when Sutherland's involvement was confirmed. What's really interesting about Goldie's reaction is that Sutherland never actually treated her badly himself. It was entirely based on what she observed of the way he treated another woman, a friend she felt compelled to stand up for. "That's classic Goldie," said a longtime associate. "She's always been protective of the people she cares about, especially other women in the industry. She saw how Donald's behavior affected Jill's confidence, and she wasn't going to let that slide, even if it meant passing on potentially great roles." The feud, if it can be called that, has remained largely one-sided and private. Sutherland has never publicly commented on Goldie or any tension between them. He may not even be aware of her feelings. But in Hollywood circles, it's well understood that Goldie Hawn and Donald Sutherland occupy very different planets, and she prefers to keep it that way. For Mel Gibson, The Bridge Too Far. By the early 2000s, Goldie Hawn had arrived to take her rightful place not only as one of Hollywood's favorite actresses, but also as one of its most formidable power players. With decades of successful films behind her, she had earned the right to be extremely choosy about her projects and co-stars alike. It was within that context that she made what was arguably one of her most absolute statements. She would never work with Mel Gibson under any circumstances. The roots of Goldie's issues with Gibson seem ideological rather than personal. Unlike her conflicts with Chevy Chase or her apprehensions regarding Bill Murray, her stance on Gibson wasn't based on direct interactions or even second-hand accounts of his on-set behavior. Rather, it was his public controversies and documented statements that allegedly led Goldie to draw a hard line. The breaking point came in the mid-2000s following Gibson's 2006 arrest for driving under the influence, during which he made anti-Semitic remarks to the arresting officer. These comments, which became public when the arrest report was leaked, created a firestorm in Hollywood and beyond. These comments weren't just offensive to Goldie, whose father was the son of Jewish immigrants. They were personal. Though the actress has never been especially outspoken about her Jewish heritage publicly, those closest to her say it's an important part of her identity. When the news about Gibson broke, Goldie was genuinely shocked and hurt, says one friend of the actress, who's known her for decades. She couldn't square the talented filmmaker with someone who could harbor those kinds of views. The situation became directly applicable to Goldie's career in 2007 when a major studio was putting together a romantic comedy aimed at older audiences. Both Goldie and Gibson were on the short list for the leading roles. Despite the project offering a substantial paycheck and a script Goldie had expressed interest in, she reportedly made her position clear. She would not participate if Gibson was cast. "It wasn't an ultimatum delivered in anger," explained someone familiar with the negotiations. She simply informed her representatives that she wasn't comfortable with the pairing and would need to pass if the studio went in that direction. What made Goldie's stance particularly notable was that it came at a time when many in Hollywood were still willing to work with Gibson despite the controversy. His directorial effort Apocalypto was released in December 2006, just months after his arrest, and still performed respectably at the box office. Many industry figures suggested that his comments, while unacceptable, were made under the influence of alcohol and didn't reflect his true character. Goldie, however, wasn't persuaded by these arguments. When asked by a close friend whether she believed in giving second chances, she reportedly said, "Forgiveness is spiritual, but he never asked for it. There's a difference between a mistake and a revelation of character." In the years that followed, Goldie continued to keep her distance from Gibson both professionally and socially. At industry events where both were present, observers marveled at the way she politely but firmly kept him at arm's length. There were no public confrontations, no dramatic scenes, just a quiet, unwavering commitment to her principles. This approach typifies Goldie's handling of her industry relationships. Throughout her career, she has rarely engaged in public feuds or spoken ill of colleagues to the press. Instead, she has exercised her power through choices who she works with, which projects she supports, and where she lends her considerable industry influence. In this way, Goldie's stance on Gibson reveals something important about her character. Behind the bubbly laugh and the approachable persona is a woman of deep conviction who is willing to take principled stands, even when they might come at a professional cost. 5. Steve McQueen, the brief encounter that left a lasting impression. Some feuds in Hollywood develop over years of difficult collaboration. Others form in an instant, a single interaction that tells one person everything they need to know about another. According to those close to Goldie Hawn, her strong feelings about Steve McQueen fall into the latter category. By the late 1970s, Goldie was riding high after Shampoo and Foul Play. Her production team was looking actively for her next project, finding a script they thought would be perfect in action comedy that required a tough female romantic lead and a rugged male counterpart. Steve McQueen, the king of cool himself, was suggested as an ideal co-star. In retrospect, the pairing made sense on paper. McQueen's intensity and Goldie's lightness could create an appealing on-screen dynamic. Both were major box office draws, and the contrast in their personas seemed tailor-made for the kind of opposites attract storyline the script presented. A dinner meeting was arranged to see if the two stars would have the necessary chemistry to carry the film. It was to be a casual affair, just Goldie McQueen and a couple of producers at a discreet restaurant in Beverly Hills. This meeting, by all accounts, was the first and last time Goldie and McQueen would ever seriously consider working together. "I remember she came back from that dinner looking completely drained," recalled Goldie's longtime friend and occasional assistant. "Not angry, not upset, just exhausted, like she'd been in some kind of silent battle for hours." According to those who heard Goldie's account of the evening, McQueen made a poor impression from the moment they were introduced. While perfectly polite on the surface, there was something in his demeanor that Goldie found deeply unsettling. She said he barely made eye contact with her when they were discussing the project. Her friend continued. He would look at the producers, even the waiters, but when he looked at her, it wasn't really seeing her. It was like she was a piece of furniture. The dinner reportedly continued with McQueen dominating the conversation, outlining his vision for the film and the changes he thought were necessary to the script. When Goldie offered her own thoughts on her character's development, witnesses say McQueen listened without comment, then continued as if she hadn't spoken. The most telling moment came when Goldie made a specific suggestion about a scene, a suggestion that one of the producers immediately praised as insightful and creative. McQueen's response was reportedly brief but cutting. "Let's focus on getting the basic structure right before we worry about the little details." By dessert, Goldie had made up her mind. In the car ride home, she reportedly told one of the producers, "He's intense, controlling, and weirdly angry about something I can't identify. I don't think this is going to work." When asked to specify, Goldie explained, "He stared through me like I was a waitress, and he wasn't even particularly nice to the actual waitress." For Goldie, that one observation contained everything she needed to know about McQueen as a potential collaborator. His treatment of service staff, people in a position of lesser power, coupled with his dismissive attitude toward her creative input, said it all about how he regarded people. The project was quietly shelved shortly afterwards, both of its stars moving on to other films. McQueen would complete only 2 more movies before his death in 1980, while Goldie continued her ascent to become one of Hollywood's most bankable female stars. What is particularly notable about this brief encounter, however, is how decisively Goldie acted upon her instincts. At a time when many actresses felt pressured to accommodate the egos and expectations of their male co-stars, she was unwilling to commit to months of filming with someone she found fundamentally disrespectful. "Goldie has always had this incredible radar for people," says a director who worked with her in the 1980s. "She can size someone up very quickly, and she trusts her gut." With McQueen, her gut was telling her to walk away, and history suggests her instincts were probably right. In the years since, McQueen's reputation for being difficult and controlling on set has become part of Hollywood lore. Stories of his demands for script approval, his conflicts with directors, and his competitive behavior toward co-stars have been well documented. What Goldie sensed in that single dinner has been confirmed by many who worked with McQueen throughout his career. This pattern, Goldie's ability to read character and react accordingly with great speed, repeats itself throughout her professional relationships. It suggests that beneath the sunny externals, there's a shrewd judge of character who has navigated Hollywood's complex power dynamics with far more strategic thinking than most have given her credit for.